Welcome to the Monopoly Mindset, the podcast where we uncover the strategies to build your real estate portfolio one property at a time.
We're your hosts, Tyler and Tommy, here to share our story of playing real-life Monopoly.
Whether you're just starting out or a seasoned investor, this is your go-to resource for mastering the real estate game.
So grab your board, roll the dice, and let's buy Boardwalk together.
Welcome to the Monopoly Mindset, episode 7. We're your hosts, Tommy and Tyler. We have a pretty cool episode. We're going to recap a little bit about our real estate life in the last week, some things that Ty and I had going on. If you didn't check out our episode last week, it was really good episode where we talked about my first 2 properties in Clark Summit, kind of how I bought them, how I sold them, and the whole process in between. So tune into that if you didn't listen to it. And today's episode, we're also going to talk about Ty's first rental property and where he executed the BRRRR strategy pretty well. And it's a really cool story. So with that being said, what happened with your week in real estate, Ty?
So I listed my Airbnb, which we obviously, yeah.
Let's
It
go.
was a very,
Congratulations. This is a very long process for Ty. So we're very happy for him and Danielle to get their property listed.
Yeah, and obviously we record these like a couple weeks early before we put them out, so people would have seen that it's listed for a while now. But yeah, I mean, going through the whole Airbnb process, I learned that it's a lot more work than long-term rentals. So we'll see how it performs, and maybe I'll do another one soon in the future. But I mean, initial thoughts is it's a lot of work, and yeah, I mean, I hope it does well. But yeah, it was very exciting.
So where would you rank it? Like Airbnb is the most work, then college rentals are second most work, and then like traditional rentals are the least amount?
Yeah. I mean, I did those in opposite order. So I bought a traditional rental first with like a family.
Mm-hmm.
Then then we managed like our college rental together, and then I went through the Airbnb process, and I've learned each one has been more and more and more work, and it makes you definitely want to go back to like traditional family single family home rentals. But yeah. No, I mean, it was a good process. The thing with Airbnb is one, I would just do things a little different next time. So like we could have paid a designer to furnish the entire property, so they pick everything out and they put everything together for you at the property over like a weekend. Me and Danielle furnished it ourselves, so we literally had everything in your house that you need to like live there for a week, say, you need to buy and track. So like a kitchen, like you don't realize how many things go into like a completely empty house. So like you need a cheese grater, a can opener, like just all this stuff that you have to track and buy. We bought it on Amazon, shipped it to our house, put it on a truck, went up there and like put it all together. Next time I'd probably just pay the designer, like, hey, furnish it. That was probably a majority of the work. And then with short-term rentals, a lot of places, specifically the Poconos, have very like strict rules. So you have to go through the township, the HOA, the county, like all of this stuff, get all these permits. And long-term rental, just you don't have any of that. So
Yeah,
we're
and
gonna talk.
you've been working on this process for a while, but the property's finally listed, and we're still waiting to get the permits to get the hot tub installed, right?
No, I have the permits for the hot tub. Now I'm just finding somebody to move the hot tub from the driveway to the concrete pad. But yeah, I mean, for example, to get a hot tub in my HOA, you need to get a county permit, a HOA permit, and there's like a third party build permit that you have to get. That's like, yeah, so you need 3 permits just to get a hot tub. But we're gonna go a lot more in depth into that whole process later.
And
And then
so, what else happened in your life of real estate this week?
yeah, I applied for a HELOC for the first time, which we talked a little bit about. So, on my primary residence, I'm hoping to get a line of credit there. I did take out some zero interest, like 2-year zero interest credit cards to pay for some of the Airbnb. So, um, I got a HELOC to basically pay off some of the debt that I used for the Airbnb, and then
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, hopefully I have some left over to do whatever else.
And so, what was that process like? Did you just call one bank? Did you call two or three banks? Is there something you had lined up that you were,
I
waiting to
looked,
call?
so I made a list of all the credit unions in my county. So there was like five. I called all of them. Probably only spoke to an actual person at like three of them because nowadays it's just a robot and it's like
Yeah,
press zero, press one, and I have very little patience and usually I just hang
no
up
one
before.
does. Like, yeah, usually I have to call back three times to be like, what button am I supposed to freaking press?
Yeah, so I basically only targeted like credit unions because they had higher loan to value. So
Yeah.
I was the one that I'm working with is claiming that they offer 90% loan to value, meaning I can get a HELOC for 90% of my equity or my loan to value essentially. But
And so
you
one other
also
And one other way, like to differentiate between certain HELOCs, like a lot of what we're seeing now are companies that are giving like a loan out for like 5 years or something, or maybe 10 years. But so it's really like a loan where you have, I mean, let's say you pull out 50 grand and you're going to be paying like $600 a month because you're paying your principal and your interest each month. Where Ty and I have been struggling to find companies that actually offer it in a slightly different way where it's really just like a line of credit that you get access to that you can borrow kind of whenever you want. And when you borrow it, you only pay interest only. So if you get that same $50,000 loan at let's say 9% interest, it might only be like $300 or something a month if you max it out. So it's a little bit cheaper than like a full second loan on a property. And that's something that companies used to offer a lot more in the past. And we've been struggling, at least I've been struggling to find companies that are offering those types of HELOCs where you pay interest only for like 10 years. And then after the 10 years, it turns into kind of that principal payment for like the next 20 years. And so it's a nice way to tap into your equity. And it's kind of like, a foolproof plan. I want to say like after 10 years, it goes back to start paying that off. And at that time of owning the property for 10 years, you'll have even more equity that if you do decide to sell, you can pay it off in a couple different ways.
yeah, but I mean, there's pros and cons to the loan versus the HELOC. Like you said, it's cheaper and it's a less monthly payment, but of
Yes.
course, none of your payment is going towards principal. So in 10 years, if you did max out the 50 grand, you still owe 50 grand versus if you do like the loan, because your payment's higher per month, but you're actually you're chipping away at that 50 grand every month. But I
Yeah.
mean, the huge pro of a HELOC is that you can pull the 50 grand, pay it off, pull the 50 grand, pay it off as many times as you want for 10 years. So like when you're doing things like BRRRR or flipping, you can basically pull that 50 grand to pay for the renovations, refinance, pay off the 50 grand, do it again. So like if you just get the loan, it's what is it? It's just like a second mortgage on your house essentially. You would pull that 50 grand, do the renovations, and then pay off that loan, and then that account's closed forever. And you'd have to go open up another one and pay like the fees to open it. So yeah, HELOC's definitely better if you want to use the money for like investing in real estate.
Yeah, and that's exactly where my mind always goes. So thanks for kind of bringing that up. But if you're getting the HELOC and you're using it to your point to try and do like a burst strategy or to purchase a property and then like with plans to refinance it later on or sell a different property, like you should always have a way to pay off the HELOC in mind. Like it's not smart to get a HELOC, max it out, and buy like a Lamborghini or any fancy car. Like not get some sort of like return on your money. It's really smart to use it as a strategic way to keep growing your wealth or getting into more properties. Specifically the burst strategy, which we'll get into a little bit later today. My week of playing real life Monopoly was pretty interesting. I had a property where my property manager texted me last Sunday and told me that our tenants fell through for next year. So that wasn't a lot of fun. We had to get a property relisted, put it on Zillow, and try to get it rented out. We had a showing yesterday that was canceled. And so definitely not the best week as far as that property went. It's been a little stressful, but I have faith that things are going to work out. And we're just going to keep it listed on Zillow for the moment and see where we go. I have been doing the HELOC process, like Ty alluded to earlier. It's not as simple as everybody, or as maybe I wish it was. As a real estate investor, you have certain things that come up just on your credit. Like I have good credit, but applying for loans, sometimes things get a little squirrely, and the bank is kind of reading my credit wrong, at least the way certain things are reported in Equifax. They're taking a property that is with TDJ, using it against my credit, but then the properties I'm telling them that are in my name, they're like, oh, we don't see those, so we're not going to even count those against you. And to me, I'm like, I'm trying to make all the numbers make sense and like give them all the information, but the bank process has been a little bit unique. So I got approved for slightly less than I was hoping for, but it's still a pretty decent amount. And I'm planning on moving forward with the HELOC just so I can tap into a little bit of extra equity, and for another purchase here with Ty, hopefully in the near future.
Yeah, and actually, this is a good time to talk about the banks because we'll talk about in my duplex deal. I had this exact scenario happen, but me and you have noticed we talk about this all the time. Maybe we just haven't found like a great lender yet, but we always seem that when we first call a bank, they offer like this awesome
Oh, it's
stuff, like
ridiculous. Yeah,
great
they're
interest rates, great loan to value, and then like a week before closing, it seems like all the numbers just get way worse. And like and the problem is you're trying to close. It's been like 3 weeks now. Like you're saying, they did a hard inquiry. They pull your credit and it's a hard inquiry. So it hits your credit. So it's like you feel like you can't back out because then you have to go get another hard inquiry. Now your credit's going to come back worse. It's already, 3 weeks have gone by, and it just seems like I don't know if they're being malicious just to get your business, but we have just noticed that they typically offer I don't know. They offer much better terms at the beginning, and then come closing, everything seems to be
Yeah,
worse.
everybody says like the car buying process is the worst, right? And the car salesman is the worst. But really, like any loan, a lot of the loan officers that you deal with, they seem to be like the worst version of a car salesman because it's like, all right, we're going to promise, and specifically with banks. I mean, I've had a lot of better relationships with maybe like independent loan officers and things like that. But whenever dealing with the bank specifically, like those people, have always been very car salesmen. They're just making things up, promising you things that they can't deliver on. Then they take it to underwriting, and then they blame underwriting for being this bad guy. And it's like, but wait, we talked about all of this. I gave you all this information ahead of time. You said that this was fine. And now you're, making this up and blaming underwriting, which is fine. But where was this when I told you all this earlier? Like, it's not like you're hearing this for the first time. Underwriting shouldn't be hearing this for the first time. Why did it take me 2 months to get to this point for you to then throw this back in my face? Like, we already discussed this.
Yeah, literally, I'm going to talk about that exact thing with today with the duplex. But yeah, I do think that one, like we just haven't. I think one, the more you do it, the more the more the more transparent the bank, like the broker's gonna be. So like if you're buying your fifth house through a broker, I think at that point it's like, hey, like I know the process. We've done this together a bunch. They're gonna be way more honest with you up front. Not that they're being dishonest, but I just think it's one of those things. It's like the more you do it, the easier it becomes.
Yeah, and it takes some time for them to like get to your, they'll do soft pulls, but until they fully like run your credit, then there's different things that come up. Like to be fair to the bank, like my tax return for last year didn't look as great because I sold a property which had like a lot more write-offs included in it, and so my capital gains, it's weird. They don't look at capital gains as like a positive, but they'll look at all the things that like I wrote off when I sold the property. And so they're like, oh, well, you lost a ton of money on that property. And it's like, well, really, I didn't. I made a
Yeah.
lot, but they won't look at the capital gains. They'll only look at the write offs from the sale. And so it made me look like a lot worse on paper. And on top of it, they're using a $2,900 mortgage against me when my mortgage is only $2,000. So it's been a very unique process.
Yeah, I
But
think it's a catch 22 that I think a lot of people run into with business in general is like you obviously want to write things off to show that you didn't make any money so that you don't have to pay taxes on it. But then when you go to get a loan, they're like, "Hey, you didn't make any money." And you're like, "I did, but like I wrote it off so that I didn't have to pay taxes." And like for example, depreciation that we talked about, just like writing off depreciation on a property, it it really helps you show that you didn't make any money, but really you did. So then it's just like it's tough then to like, and the banks know it, they get it, right? Like they're not, they
The
know
guy
what's going
tried,
on.
dude, the guy tried telling me, he's like, hey, I know that you did this to save roughly like $1,200 on your taxes by filing this way, but I recommend just paying the $1,200 next year. It's like, you can go pound sand.
Yeah. Yeah, but
Last thing about my real estate week, I had an exciting update. So I've been under contract for a property for what, roughly 4, 5 months?
forever.
Yes. I always seem to find these properties that have a unique clause in them when they're listed. And so, long story short, this property had an older couple with a son that has special needs, and they were looking to find a ranch home in a specific area. And so they could not find the house that they wanted. And when I went to buy the property 5 months ago, it was contingent on them finding another house. And I said, sure, I'll wait. I got no problem waiting. I knew the property was great. It was in a location that I've been targeting, and it's got a couple of extra bedrooms. So it was a house that I really wanted. I said, sure, I'll wait. But throughout this process, I was starting to doubt if I was actually going to get that house, and it became frustrating because I had extra money and I'm like, I want to buy a house. I'm under contract for a house, but am I ever going to be able to buy this house? What's going on? So great news, they are now under contract at another property. So now our contract is officially moving forward, contingent obviously on them closing on this new house, but things seem to be moving in the right direction. So I'm hoping to get another property under my belt here in
Yeah, and
2025.
I know you mentioned making that a single family rental, but did you still plan on doing college or were you looking for like a family?
Yeah, so that's a predicament that I'm in. I'm not 100% sure. I think at the moment, since it's now hopefully going to close before, June, when college kids are typically looking, I think I'm going to try to see if I can put some college kids in there. But worst case, if I can't, the issue that I have with trying to make it like a single family, so the property's set up like a duplex. I was going to just make it like a 5, 6 bedroom for college kids and, kind of give them the whole house. But if I want to, I can make it a duplex. The only issue is upstairs, there's a large space that's set up as a kitchen, but it's not finished. So I'll have to make a couple extra repairs, and I'll probably put 5 to 10 grand into making this like an actual kitchen upstairs. And that kitchen would have been another bedroom for college students. So I'm kind of like in between, do I make it, a nice duplex and rent it to, traditional families, or but like putting that kitchen in there, then I'll probably never want to rent that property to college students. So I'm kind of torn on what I'm going to do. We'll play it out. I think at the moment I'm going to try to get some college kids in there. And if it fails, then I'll redo the kitchen and I'll just make it a duplex and we'll go from there, see how it goes.
Yeah, June might be a little late to get people for fall semester, but
Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll keep everybody updated on that process. But anyway, now that you got our update of playing real life Monopoly, let's get into Ty's first real estate purchase from an investment perspective, where he used the BRRRR strategy. I know we've talked about the BRRRR strategy a little bit, but just to give everybody another breakdown, BRRRR stands for buy, rehab, rent, refinance, and repeat. This is the BRRRR book by David Green. If you haven't read this book, highly recommend reading this book. It gives a ton of great real estate advice. David Green's a phenomenal real estate investor. He gives a ton of knowledge. I mean, a lot of what Ty and I have learned in real estate is through David Green and Brandon Turner. They're two of our favorite people, and we really like the BRRRR strategy. It's been great for us. Ty, you want to tell us why it's been a powerful real estate investing tool?
Yeah, I mean, we briefly mentioned it in a previous episode, but it allows you to pull out and get back a majority, if not all of the money that you put into a property. So when you're looking at a return on investment, the less you put down, you know, the higher your ROI is. So um, I think it's very tough in today's market. Like I keep hearing from people like the BRRRR is dead, BRRRR strategy is dead. I also keep hearing that real estate's dead to invest in, but like I don't know. I think it's just harder, and it's a hard time to get started in it. But I do think it's definitely still possible.
Well, and if you do things during hard times, right, it's only going to be better during the good times. So the harder work that we're putting in, the more properties we're getting under contract today. In 2 to 3 years, people are going to be like, "Damn, Ty and Tom were lucky. They were doing all these real estate deals, and now look, kind of similar to COVID. Everybody was like, why the hell would you buy real estate then? Like, no one should be buying. It's impossible to buy." And now we're saying, "Hey, we were lucky during that." Well, we did the hard work when things were hard. So
Yeah, maybe we'll get to like the golden years that people talk about, like 2016 to 2019, and keep, but not holding my breath.
Yeah, but some common I mean, to your point, the BRRRR strategy does it's a little bit harder to execute now, and you might leave some money into a deal, but at the end of the day, you're buying a house that's undervalued and you're going to rehab it. So that's always going to force some equity, which is great. Any type of forced equity is going to, have a ton of value. Then you rent it out, and like where you have issues in today's market is you might rent it out for a little bit below like you might be a little bit negative almost on your mortgage, right? So if your mortgage is 2,200, like you might only get $2,000 in rent per se, and so people would say, "Oh, well, that's a negative return. Like you're losing $200." But the positive is you just rehab this property. You shouldn't have too many expenses coming up, right? You just put in a new kitchen, new floors, new paint. Like the house is in decent shape, new roof most likely. So you're not going to have to do a ton of repairs. So even though you're kind of losing that $200 a month, once you refinance it to get that higher payment. But the cool part is, say if you bought it for $60,000 out of pocket, now you refinance and you pull out, I don't know, let's say $50,000. So you left 10 grand into the property. You're losing roughly $200 a month, but you have a good property that in a couple years you'll be able to most likely refinance out again and try to fix that cash flow once interest rates go down. So it's still doable, but it's not doable in the way that like, oh, I did a burst strategy. I'm cash flowing $300 a month positive cash flow. You might be a couple $100 negative, but the strategy I think is still there in my biased opinion. Like I know it's not something we've done, but it's something we're talking about and looking at doing. And then the coolest part is repeat. So you take that 60 grand, you get 50 back. Well, now you go buy another property and you repeat that process. And now that's how you slowly build a real estate portfolio. And like in the Burr book, they talk about one of the strategies. It's like you do that for 5 years, you buy one a year. Now you have five. Well, you get into year six, you sell property one because it's got some equity from loan pay down, stuff like that, and you buy two more. And so now like it's just a way to snowball and keep growing. So
Or not
Burr strategy.
sell. You could just refinance at that point because after 5 years, depending on your interest rate, hopefully you have some equity in that property and you're able to cash out, refinance again, and then use that money to buy your sixth property. And so like I'm not there yet, but you will get to a point where your cash flow and like equity allows you to buy more properties every year instead of like when you're just starting out, it's just a constant like I have to save this money and buy a property. Save, okay, I bought that one. Save this chunk again, buy a property, and that's why it's like a slow start. But again, I'm hoping at least after like five or so properties, like that's when it starts to like snowball, and you're able to buy more properties with the cash flow and the equity that you have in your other properties.
Yeah, and that's something still in the burst strategy. Like you're still like you get rich in real estate from two ways, right? You get it from buying and like appreciation, or from cash flow. Those are kind of like the two ways to make money in real estate. So the burst strategy is still going to work from an appreciation perspective. Like your property's going to appreciate, it's worth more money. You just rehabbed it. But that's something people don't think about. They don't talk about. Like everybody wants the cash flow. I mean, shoot, you and I want the cash flow too. So it makes sense. But the appreciation is kind of the silent killer. Like that's really where you make a ton of the money. So just getting those five properties and letting that appreciation grow over 5 years, you're going to be able to refi or sell, and you get into that return on equity play and grow from there.
Yeah, like to your point, we would rather have 10 properties that cash flow $100 a month than one property that cash flows 2,000 a month, right? So our cash flow from the 10 is 1,000 total. It's half as much as the one property that's cash flowing 2,000 a month, but the appreciation and loan pay down that you're going to get on the 10, let's just say all the properties are worth the same. But in 10 years, you're going to make, way more money with the 10 properties, even though each one cash flows less. Now, I still don't recommend negative cash flow. People say that cash flow just allows you to basically stay alive during like a recession, or like it's like defense. So it allows you to hold on to the property for long term. So if you're in negative cash flow, let's say you're paying 200 a month to keep that property. Well, what if you have 10 properties? Now you're paying 2,000 a month, right? So it's not scalable. You can't continue to shell out money
Yeah,
every
yeah,
month.
definitely don't recommend having every property that way. But I will counter. I mean, this is again more my bias mindset towards real estate. But if you're going to buy an investment, right? Like if you're going to invest into like a Roth IRA, and maybe that's a bad example because of how valuable Roth IRAs are. But if you're going to put $500 a month into a Roth IRA, I mean, it's technically negative $500, right? I mean, I know you're investing at that point, but if you're putting $200 of extra, negative cash flow into a property, like it's still getting 3%. Like there's still a lot of other avenues to it. So just saying, like you can potentially look at it as an investment in general too, versus just a negative cash flow. If you're going to play like maybe the appreciation play while interest rates are high, you look at it's a 5 year thing, and like interest rates hopefully drop in 5 years, and you can refinance, and that property will be cash flowing much more. So just a unique way to look about it instead of being like, oh my God, it's negative $200, could never do it. To your point, not scalable, right? You're not going to do that for 10 properties, losing 2 grand a month. That's a lot more stressful. But for a couple properties, I don't think it's the end of the world.
Yeah. Well, and the type of loan that I used, they wouldn't even allow that to get the loan. So
Yeah, that's very true too. So let's that leads us kind of into, after we rambled about the BRRRR strategy. But again, great book by David Green, The BRRRR Strategy. Highly recommend reading it. Ask Ty and I any questions about that book. We've read it several times. We'll probably read it again this year. It's a really good book to get your real estate journey started. So Ty, can you tell us a little bit about your first property, like maybe the deal, how you found the property, purchase price, stuff like that?
yeah. So we bought our primary. We lived there for 2 years. I'm gonna try and start from the beginning. One thing that I really want to stress on this podcast is that, like, the difficulty of real estate. I do want to be like realistic and just make sure that we're not coming off as like it's really easy. And so the first step in buying a rental property is saving up the money to buy it. And I think that this is almost like not talked about as much. That's one thing I love about David Green. People are like, "Hey, I want to get into real estate and I have no money. What should I do?" David Green's like the only one that's like, work more hours at your job and save money. Like, it seems like all these other people are like, "Oh, get into real estate, no money down." David Green's like, "No, like you need money and you have to make a lot more and save it."
Yeah, everybody else is
But
like creative finance. Just go figure out this creative finance deal, or borrow money from this person, borrow money from that person. It's so easy. But to your point, David Green, it's so great. It's like I got into real estate because I worked really hard as a waiter, and then I picked up extra hours as a waiter, and then I got so good at that I became the best waiter, and I was making the most money and getting the most tips. And then I became a cop, and I'm working as a cop, and I'm picking up extra shifts, and I'm still working as a waiter to pick up extra money on the weekends. And he's like, I
yeah,
just
I think
worked really hard. Like, and
he
that's
said he
everybody.
worked like 90 hours a week as a police officer and was like sleeping in his car. And like, I think that's the more realistic route to be successful in real estate. And I'm not like, obviously we got a seller financing deal with with very little money down. It's for sure possible. I just think for the average person, the most realistic route is, personally, I could be wrong, but it seems like it's like, all right, if you don't have any money, figure out a way to make more money at your job and then save it. But anyway, so my whole point with that is, we bought our primary. I think a year or two went by, spent all of our money on that. And so Danielle's a nurse, and during COVID, she did a travel nurse contract. And honestly, in like 3 months, we saved a majority of the money to pay for this duplex. But it wasn't like fun for her. I mean, she did a majority of the work, but like she was driving. Well, she did a contract in basically Washington D.C. And so like she was staying in a hotel she would do 3 days in a row. She would stay in a hotel for 2 nights, and half the time we would get an Airbnb, I would drive down there with both dogs and I'd work from this Airbnb just to like be with her at night. She was working 12-hour shifts, so like she was gone the whole time. I'm sitting in this like converted basement apartment in DC, like trying to work from there, with both dogs. And I don't know, I mean, it wasn't fun, but like I would do it again, obviously. She was the one actually doing the contract, but like my whole point is like it was a sacrifice that we made. And the whole travel nursing thing was awesome. I mean, I don't want to say COVID was great, but if you were a nurse, it allowed you to make a lot of money. So that's basically where majority of our money came from to buy the property. Once we had well, at least enough, I thought we had enough. Reached out to my realtor that I bought this house from and just said, "Hey, I'm looking for another rental. I want to try and do the BRRRR. So like I need something that needs work. Here's my price range." And I specifically wanted to buy multifamily. I and even still, like I'm not super interested in single family, and already I've seen like awesome perks from multifamily, but there's just very little in my county for sale. I've mentioned this before, like literally maybe 3 or 4 will sell per year, like duplex, triplex, fourplex. So let's see. Hit him up. We started looking at properties, and to be honest, this was the first time. I guess actually thinking about it now, this was a while ago, so trying to remember. But I wasn't just trying to buy. I wasn't just looking at multifamily. Because I know that I had put in like 30 offers before I got this one accepted. And on my whiteboard, I had each month, my goal was to put in 5 offers a month. And each month I'd tally, until I got 5. But this was the first time, before I even bought my first investment property, this was the first time that I really realized like how hard real estate was. And I never once was like, oh, this isn't for me. I'm not doing this. Like it didn't even cross my mind, but for sure I was like, oh wow, this is not as easy as like listening to podcasts and reading the books and how kind of easy they make it seem in a sense. Because after putting in like 20 offers, you're like, do I just keep putting in offers? Like, am I ever going to get one accepted? Do I just give up? Do I just invest in an index fund? But yeah, I mean, it got a little, I guess the word is demoralizing or humbling of like how difficult it really is to get a good deal.
And at this point, I think you and I were putting in offers together, right? Weren't we looking at properties kind of together? This was right when I moved to Florida. And so we were looking at a lot together and we were putting in a lot of offers. And then, like, one of the cool things, though, is over time, I mean, the money that Ty had saved started growing a little bit more each month because they were still saving a couple extra dollars each month. And so I started to get in a more different financial situation. I lost my job and I had some things that I was going through. So I was like, Ty, you know what? I'm actually going to back out. But one of the benefits for Ty is that he was growing his money and making a little bit more money. And I mean, you'll get to when this deal came up. But when the deal came up, you were able to, with a little bit extra money, get the deal kind of on your own, as I had to back out with and just not, wasn't able to go into a property with you at that time.
Yeah, and I think to be honest, I was way more eager to buy a rental, so I was okay with not getting all my money back. And
Yeah.
you had already owned like a bunch of properties at that point, so you were not as like eager to just dive in. So you were like very strict on like, no, we need to get like an amazing deal. And then, looking back, I'm kind of getting more and more to that point is like just hold out until you do get an amazing deal. But so yeah, I mean, we were conflicted a little bit because like I'd be like, all right, come on, like it's a good deal, it's not great, let's buy it. And you were like, I don't want to like throw my money away. But yeah, so you backed out. Finally, so a duplex came on the market for well, actually, it was listed for 280. Um, but I had not looked at it until the price had already dropped to 250. So we went and looked at it when it was 250. I think it was already on the market for like 3 months at this point. It was a 1 bed, 1 bath, and a 2 bed, 1 bath. Um, and we saw it, and like our strategy, and part of the reason that we weren't getting 20 offers accepted is, like we talked about before, one, we were looking on market, and we were just basically offering like super low offers to try and get something that the BRRRR strategy would make sense. And like a good rule of thumb is that you want to be all in, include, so the purchase price and the renovations should be 70% of the home's value, after the ARV, or the after repair value, after you're done the renovations. So quick example, you buy a place for 60 grand, you put in 10 grand, it gets appraised for 100. So you're all in for 70. And so like when you're making these offers, you almost have to offer 50 or 60% of the after repair value. So we saw the duplex, it was listed for 250, and I think we offered like 180. And if I would have gotten it for 180, we for sure would have gotten all of our money back.
Yeah.
But we offered 180. They said no, like probably immediately. Like, okay, that's fine. Let's keep on looking. This is normal. Everybody else says no on day one. Couple weeks go by, and I go back to my realtor, and I was like, hey, like, I think, I really like the multifamily aspect. There's not that many. Let's go up to 195 or something. Like, see if they'll bite a little bit. And I think they still said no. And I was like, okay, well, that property's probably done. But one thing we talked about in the previous episodes, like time on market's very important. The longer something sits, the more willingly the buyer's gonna come down in price. So I don't know how much time went by from our first offer until they finally came back to us, but I think they came back to us at, I didn't even put in a third offer, but like 2 or 3 weeks had gone by. We still, they knew that we were interested, and I think they came back at 215, and I forget, maybe 220, somewhere
I
in
think it was
between the
220.
190. Yeah, in between the 190 and 250 area. And I was like, I can't do 220. Like, it's talking about that 70%, I'll probably be at like 90. I just can't do that. So I think I ran the numbers again, and I offered 207.5. And that was like my third offer at this point. No contingencies. And actually, I wasn't planning on doing the BRRRR strategy.
Yeah, you were
My
just going to
plan was,
buy it as a duplex.
yeah, I was just going to buy it as like a normal, put 20% down. I was going to do some renovations, but my idea was like, oh, I'll refinance in like 3 to 4 years and cash out, but I don't need to like do the BRRRR strategy right now. Because honestly, it didn't need enough work that I thought the BRRRR strategy made sense. Like the total renovation was only 15,000. So I offered 207, and they countered at 215. And honestly, it was like a really hard decision, but I said no. Because again, I started at 180, and like I can't come up to 215. So I said no. And it is hard, because like after putting in 30 offers, you're like, all I'd have to do is go up 8,000 and I get this duplex. But like if the numbers don't make sense, you like shouldn't do it. So I was at my brother's wedding getting ready in the morning, and my realtor called me, and like a week had gone by since they said 215, and I said no. And my realtor called me and was like, hey, they'll do the 207. So probably like one of the best days of my life, to be honest.
Yeah.
Just like to be honest, this is my favorite deal that I've ever done, and maybe the worst. I don't know, like it's funny, but like not that it was a bad deal, but definitely my favorite deal, and might be my favorite deal forever, just because it was the first real estate investment property that I ever bought.
Yeah, and you
That I
did it
made
on
like,
your own, and you persevered. I mean, it was a very long process. It was the work that you put in, right? The hard work, the 30 offers, the getting rejected time over time again, offering at 180, taking weeks to go by, and like weeks go by in a real estate transaction, you're like, oh, this is dead. Like somebody else is going to buy it. Like it's just not a good deal for me. Then going up to 195, going to 207. and then like you're 8K away telling them no, sticking with your 207, holding out. And then I mean just the coolness of it, your brother's wedding, it's a great day for your family and everybody involved anyway, and then getting that phone call as well, like it's yeah, very, very great deal. And great job by you.
Yeah. So let's see. We got it under contract at 207, and again, I wasn't going to do a BRRRR. So basically, the big difference with financing with a BRRRR is with a BRRRR, you would either do hard money or cash. And I obviously didn't have the cash, so but I wasn't planning on doing any of those. I was just going to go get a normal investment loan, put down 20%.
And the reason with the BRRRR you do hard money or cash is because that's when you kind of do the rehab. So you buy it with hard money, then you do the rehab real quick, and then you rent it out, then you refinance it. So it's kind of like the hard money is a way to get extra money. So if Ty was buying it for 207, he might get a loan for like 240 or 250, so he can take the extra 20, 30K, put it into the renovation so that when he goes to get it refinanced, it might say that it's worth $300,000 because Ty just put 40 or 50 grand into it. That's why he was saying he wanted to go with a hard money or cash route.
Yeah, so and the reason that you can't really do that with a traditional loan is because they have like a
Like a
seasoning
holding,
period.
yeah.
So like you can't just go get like a traditional loan for 3 months and then renovate and refinance. Like they're like, no. I think like part of it is they don't get paid until like 6 months or a year until the loan has been in place for 6 months or for a year. So like you can't just go get like a traditional 30-year loan and then refinance in 3 months. And I'm pretty sure if you try, like that bank will never work with you again. It's like I think they won't let you, but also it's just kind of like I don't know.
Yeah, and I've had some
Uh,
banks even give me a hard time about seasoning periods if I did get a hard money loan. They said they wanted me to own the property for at least 6 months, even if they weren't the primary lender. So there's definitely conversations. Like I would always, we've talked about banks earlier in this episode, but always let them know everything that you plan on doing because you don't want to be in a situation where, oh, I did my BRRRR in 3 months and now I have 3 months left until the bank I was going to use will allow me to get out of this loan. So it's definitely worth having. You don't want to hide anything from the bank. Give them all the information up front, and then hopefully, that doesn't impact you later on.
yeah, and I mean you're not the first person to do a BRRRR. They know what this strategy is, especially if you're working with like a broker that deals with real estate investors, which ideally you should be. So I went to a broker, and so a broker just finds a specific bank for you for your exact needs, and he knew it was my first rental property going into it. I've worked with him before. And so 3 weeks go by. I don't think I'm missing anything. We actually did get an appraisal, and the appraisal came back 243, and like bought it for 207. And even though this isn't really how it works, I was like, I just made 35 grand. Like, holy shit. That was also like, and like, again, I couldn't have sold it for 243 and I wouldn't have made 35 grand because closing costs and blah, blah, real estate commissions. But like in my mind, I was like, I just bought this property for 207, came back 243 or something. Like it was all worth it basically. But at that point I was like, okay, this is probably going to be a good deal because I didn't even do the renovations yet and get the appraisal later. Um, so anyway, I'm working with my broker, and literally like a week before closing, he called me and was like, "Hey, so like the bank that we applied with, they don't work with first-time investors. You had to have had like other real estate broker or real estate experience, have other rental properties in order for them to accept your loan." And I'm like, going back to what we talked about at the beginning, I was like, you knew that this was my first rental property. Like this is something that you should have known from day one. And here's where this deal gets very weird is he was like, we probably don't have enough time to apply for another bank um, because closing is in a week. However, I'm also a hard money lender and I'll just lend you the money myself with hard money. And
When Ty called
That's
me and told me this, we were like, this almost sounds illegal. Like, what the hell just happened? This guy knew it was Ty's first rental property. It was talked about a ton of times. And going through the situation, we actually called like a loan officer buddy of ours and like talked through the scenario and was like, does this make any sense at all? Like, isn't this relatively illegal? Like, how is this guy doing it? Because we were kind of, concerned for Ty. We felt like it was a very weird situation that had
I mean, it's
happened.
just like it's a massive conflict of interest, right? Like,
Yeah,
hey, I wasn't able to get you the loan that you asked for, but I actually lend money and I'll lend you the money. Um, however, my real estate agent that I trust a lot recommended this guy and he trusts him a lot. He's been working with him for probably 20 years. So I was like, okay, I'll do this because like I wanted the property. So basically what the hard money looks like is I pay him 2% and this points. So I paid him 2% on the total loan. I put down 20% still. And I will say he really like kind of hooked me up because hard money loans are typically like 14% if you're, especially if it's your first investment property. The more experience you have, the lower the rates will get for hard money. Again, the more you do it, the easier it gets. But like if it's your first investment property, you're probably going to be around 13, 14%. And that's typically what this guy would have lended money out for. But he was like, because I kind of messed up on getting you the loan, I'm going to make the percentage equal the same payment that you would have been paying with a normal 30-year loan. So like if it was 1,500, he estimated me 1,500 before. He was like, I'm going to give you, I think he gave me like 9.5% so that my payment was still 1,500. Granted, it's interest only. But so, I don't want to make it sound like it was malicious because he did 9.5% for hard money is like very, very good. And everything actually worked out really well. And I would still use them again. But the whole
just to show
situation,
you, even I mean, looking at Ty and I's first real estate deals, I had a unique scenario where I pushed through, and a lot of people were like, oh, you should back out at this time. I mean, this is a little bit unique for Ty, right? Like he had no other options. He has been going down this mortgage process. He's officially approved. Everything's good to go. They're what, 2.5 weeks out from closing. Then this guy
oh
drops a
no, like a
bomb
week, like less
a
than a
week a
week.
week out from closing, and
Yeah.
this guy drops a bomb on him like, hey, I can't get you approved anymore. Like Ty's absolutely like dead in the water. I mean, this is an awful scenario, but at least the guy was able to come up with another solution. Again, doesn't seem like it ended up being malicious because everything happened perfectly for Tyler, but it was a very unique scenario, and Ty could have easily like backed out, said financing fell through. He could have walked away. Like a lot of people might have walked away in this scenario. Oh, I don't want to do hard money. It's too risky. I mean, it's Ty's first real estate deal, and the guy did hard money. I mean, that's pretty impressive because a lot of people, I mean, I've still never used hard money because it's a unique thing, even for me. So I
Yeah,
think
it's
there's a
definitely
lot of
scary.
value in like sticking through a deal and persevering through this entire process.
Yeah, so once he basically offered the hard money thing, well, now it is a BRRRR. Like I don't have any other option because the hard money is a 12-month loan. So like I have to refinance within 12 months. So typically in hard money, they'd also lend you the money for the renovations. But because the renovation estimate was like 12,000, I probably should have borrowed the money for the 12,000, but I didn't want to pay interest because I had it. I barely had it. I had like 15,000 or something. So anyway, we closed. Everything went fine. Again, I paid him 2% on the initial loan, which was like because I put down 20%, it was like 160. So he's getting almost $4,000 just up front. Then he's getting 9.5% on the 160 until I refinance for up to a year, and then I go refinance, etc. So I did renovations. I had a contractor do like the big stuff. Oh well, actually, one of the sides was occupied. This guy has been there for like 10 years. He knew the owner personally. His rent was way undervalued. I think his rent at the time was like 650, and he was in the one bedroom. And on day one when I closed, I went over there, had him sign a new lease. He signed for 2 years, and I was like, "Hey man, like you obviously know you're way under rent. Like they never raised rent on him." And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "I got to raise rent." And he was like, "Okay, what do you think?" And I was like, "I don't know, 800." And he was like, "Okay, perfect." Like he didn't care because honestly, even 800 for a one bedroom, one bath in
Was
my
still
area
pretty
is,
below rent for that area.
yeah, like it's probably still below. But so he signed a 2 year lease. The best tenant. Well, I mean, I haven't had that many tenants, but like the best tenant I could ever ask for. I hope he stays there forever. Doesn't call me, has never been late. Like awesome. And his 2 year lease is coming up, and I'm like, how much do I want to raise rent? Because he's like
Because he's been
awesome.
such a
So
good son. And that's a great
yeah,
story. I mean, sometimes you buy a property and you have two bad tenants in there and you got to try and get them out. So at least Ty had one side, it sounds like, was vacant. There was no one in it. And then the other side had a great tenant that Ty bumped rent on. And 2 years later, still owns the property, still pays rent. Now is deciding if he bumps the rent up, on this property or for this guy or not.
yeah. And I actually, turns out I actually went to college with a friend that lives in Baltimore that works at the same company as him, and they know each other. So like I texted my friend, I was like, "Hey, like, what do you know about this guy?" And he said, "Oh, he's like a good guy," and blah blah, like nothing negative. So
That's great.
so the other side needed all the renovations, basically, and I had the contractor do like the big stuff that I didn't feel like doing. He did. There was a shower with a window in it to outside, and he was basically just like, honestly, he has a bunch of rentals himself, which is great from a contractor's perspective because he is doing the work with the eyes of a real estate investor. So he knows like I'm not going to do like the highest end furnishings and stuff on a flip. You kind
Yeah.
of want to not do the cheapest option, but like, somewhere in the middle. So there was a window in the shower, and he basically said that these just he's seen they just can cause problems, and basically the window was like leaking and there was causing like mildew and stuff behind the shower wall. So we ripped out the whole shower, uh, boarded up the window or whatever he did, put siding on the outside, and did like a new tile shower. Let's see. Me and Danielle painted the cabinets ourselves, which I'll probably never do again. We like, took all the doors off. I brought them all back to my house, hung them all up in my basement, painted them. Let's see. There was hardwood already there, but it needed refinished like really bad. So I got did it? No, I wanted to just get them cleaned actually. They weren't like terrible. I wanted to get them cleaned. The company that came out to clean them said that it had no protective coating on it at all, and I was gonna spend like, I don't know, 2,000 or something to put the coating on and then clean it. And I basically just decided to put LVP, or like laminate vinyl plank, luxury vinyl plank on top of the hardwood. And I did that myself. I think I spent like 1,500 in materials. Gave my buddy like $200 to come help me one day. And so I spent like 2 grand on the floor. But again, I probably wouldn't do it myself. Like, it's just the
That's where
more that
Ty and
I,
I definitely different people. I realized very early on at my first house, I tried doing some things on my own. I was like, I'm never doing this ever again. And since I've always paid people to do things, and Ty's been much more hands on. I mean, he probably saved a couple $1,000s by doing some of
yeah,
these side jobs and work, by himself. But it was something that I realized I am completely fine paying somebody. They're probably going to do, let's say, a better job. They'll probably definitely do
they
a
will
better
do a better
job.
job.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they'll
like
do a
for
better
sure.
job. It'll be quicker, easier. Hey, I'm going to pay you to paint the cabinets. The cabinets are painted. It's done, and it's not, a 2 week process or a couple day process or whatever. So that's just the way
Yeah.
that I've operated. And Ty slowly changed his mindset into to hiring jobs out, not trying to do as much by himself.
Yeah, I mean, I think he quoted me like 6 grand to do the floors, and I spent $1,500 on materials and gave my buddy 200 bucks. So like I was way cheaper, but they're just it's just a lot easier. I mean, it depends, how busy you are, and I didn't have any money to go buy another deal. So like my other option was just I don't know, not do anything. So I was like, I might as well save a couple $1,000. So I did a good amount of work. Like I was under the house because there's no basement. So I was literally crawling under like a foot section between the floorboards and the dirt under the house, like fixing the hose and the water line and the laundry vent and all this stuff. So that probably it only took like a month. So I listed that side, 2 bed, 1 bath, and literally the first day it was on Zillow, I had like 10 people call me.
That's
Um,
awesome.
yeah, I think there's just high demand in my area for like single family homes, and this is like semi detached because it's like a duplex with 2 sides, and each side has like a yard.
Yeah.
The 2 bed, 1 bath also had like a pretty big shed, which I did just rent out included in her rent. But like, I mean, storage in my area, like you can get $100 a month for a shed. Um, so I had like 10 people reach out. Um, and basically it was kind of just like first come, first serve for whoever qualifies. So that's like, you know, monthly their income should be 3 to 4 times rent, credit score, background check, like no, assaults or felonies, things like that, no evictions. And I got somebody in there like in a day. Like she saw it like the day that it was listed, gave me the security deposit like the next day. Um, and so yeah, everything was good. My
And so what
total,
was her rent?
hers was 1,300, the other side was 800, and then she had a dog. I think I charged 35 for the dog. So
Yeah. And that shows the
um,
value too in renovating one side of a property, right? Because you went from $800 to the non-renovated side, right?
well,
And
she
then
has a 2 bed though.
okay, so slightly bigger too. But the renovations
Yeah,
definitely helped you get extra rent as well.
yeah. So total, I was at like 2135. She signed a 1 year lease. She's on month to month now, but
And
everything's
so
been
then
going
what was
pretty
the
smooth.
refinance process like once you got, the renovations done, you just got the second tenant in place, and now you're starting to say, I don't want to pay that 9.5% hard money loan, even though it was great that they hooked you up and you were able to still close on the property. Now you're starting to think, how can I get out of this hard money loan and get into a more traditional bank loan?
Yeah, so uh my cash flow with the hard money was actually like 600 bucks a month. I think my total monthly payment was like 1350 or something, maybe 1400, and I was bringing in 21. And so this kind of explains the BRRRR strategy and how your cash flow goes down, but you're pulling out a large chunk of money. So cash flowing like 500 bucks. I actually waited longer than I needed to do the refinance because I knew that the amount that I was going to pull out, I wasn't going to be able to go, it wasn't going to be enough for me to go buy another property. And I knew that my cash flow would go down. So I waited like 6 months probably until I had a year. I probably waited 6 or 8 months. I went back to the same broker. Maybe it was a mistake. I don't know. Um,
I mean,
and he was
everything
like,
in real estate is relationship based. Even, I mean, this guy was able to get you to close. He's a broker. Had a decent relationship with him, so why not? I don't think you did anything wrong going back to him.
no, I mean, and again, everything worked out really well. And we actually tried to use him for hard money like after this. And if I get
Yep.
something that needs hard money, I'll probably hit him up again. Because I honestly, I've talked to a few different people in the industry, and they all said positive things about him. So, and again, he's also a real estate investor, and so like those are kind of the people that you want to work with. So he told me that, hey, we're going to do this thing called a DSCR loan, and DSCR is debt service coverage ratio, and so it's not like uh, I'm still like figuring all of this out because the banking aspect is confusing. But basically, if you have a property in an LLC, you can't get like a conventional 20% down loan like you would. You can buy an investment property under your name at a normal bank, but if it's in an LLC, to them it's like a whole different. It's like a business loan. Whereas so debt service coverage ratio, it can be in an LLC, and they're only looking at the rent. Um, to your payment. So like there has to be cash flow essentially. So they will not lend to you if there's no cash flow. So they came out, they do like a market rent analysis, and then also see what your current rents are. So you have to have leases in place. Long story short, I think. Oh, and you get an appraisal. And so my second appraisal, now that I'm done, came back like 285 or something. And I was like, oh my gosh,
This
like
is
that.
awesome.
Yeah. And I had only owed 160. And so now I have $120,000 equity. I did not think at all it was going to be 180 or 285, or I think when we ran the numbers, like we projected that it was going to be worth like 250 to 260. So, and I was all in at 220. So that's like 75%. I talked about the 70% like goal, and so I was pretty close to my first deal. But I want to share the projections basically. Let's see.
Like we said before, Ty is our numbers guy, so
Yeah, and so this sheet, we want to work on something that is kind of more for the BRRRR strategy, because this doesn't really allow you to like look at the BRRRR strategy, but so that it might be a little confusing. So the purchase price in this case, I'm like doing this from a refinance perspective. So I bought it for 207, but when I'm refinancing, you're kind of going based on like it's kind of think of it like you would buy that place again for 285, whatever the appraisal was. So the
yeah.
appraisal was 285. Or it might have been 280. I'd have to go look, but closing cost was probably 15,000. Now the 25% loan to value. This was something that was a learning curve, because when I was listening to the podcast, I like everybody just said
Everyone
20.
says 20% down, so you always think you get 80% loan to value. And in this example, Ty was only able to get 75% loan to value, so he had to leave 25% into the deal.
Yeah, and yeah, so I was expecting basically 5%. I had to leave 5% in, 5% more than I had thought. And at 280,000, that's like 12, 12,500 or whatever. So the down payment, again, this is a refinance, but think about it as I'm leaving in 25%. I'm financing 213, and this down payment is like the equity that I already have in the property. And the interest rate. So the thing with DSCR is it is a lot higher, probably like a whole percent higher than if I did it in my name and went with like a local bank. But I got an 8.5% rate, which is honestly terrible. But I'm hoping that I can refinance in a couple years, and get, you know, in a couple years, I'm hoping they go down and it's like 5.5. Interest only is no, and it's a 30-year loan. And so one thing with this sheet is it doesn't really like allow you to, again, do the BRRRR strategy, but the total cash that you spent, basically when I refinanced, I got a check for, let's see, the financed amount, so the 213, then I subtract what I already owed, which is like 160. I got a check for like $30,000 cash out, and I was all in at like 60. I did all the numbers, and basically I left in $30,000. So like I put in say 60. After the 6 months had gone by, I got 30 back. And so on this sheet, I did just change this to 30,000, because this is like my total like all in money, and this is where the BRRRR strategy is so powerful. Is like instead of spending 86, I basically spent 30. And so after plugging everything in, this basically gives me a cash flow of 1,800 a year. Again, property tax, insurance, maintenance and repairs. I'm managing it myself, so all that's zero, and then capex 10%. And so this tells me that my cash flow is 18, my cash on cash return is 6, and my total ROI is 11. Which, again, I say it's like my favorite deal. It's obviously not a killer deal. Like I I probably wouldn't do a 6% cash on cash return deal now if I knew that's what it was going into it. But you just got to get started, and like you learn so much. You just get started, and like everybody says, it doesn't really matter if you make a killing on your first deal. So yeah, I've kind of just been rambling for a while, but that's what the
No,
numbers look
it's
like.
perfectly fine. I think everybody appreciates all the insight and detail that you provide. It really paints like the foolproof picture on how to get started, with a bird property, how to buy your first investment property. It's obviously a lot more work and a lot more money when you purchase an investment property and you have to put the 20 to 25% down. It's not, I don't call it easy to buy a primary residence because they're not easy at all, but it's much harder to then go buy an investment property, and that's why there's few real estate investors in general. And that's why one thing that we talk about is just house hacking. Whether you can buy that duplex and you're the person living in one side, it makes it slightly easier because then you can keep house hacking and moving out. Even if you're buying a single family house and you just decide to keep it after and keep it as a rental, it's still a version of a house hack. And we say to do that because going the process of purchasing something as an investment property, there's a lot more fine detail. Things are a little bit more strict and they're not as easy as it is buying a primary residence. So I think with you taking the time and explaining all of the steps of how your process went, it gave us a ton of detail about how, to your point, hard real estate investing can be. It's not easy at all. And we want people to know that, but also know that even though this was a very difficult process, might not be the best deal numbers wise. All the lessons that you learned doing this, you would redo it 100%, and it's your favorite deal because of everything that you've learned through it. And it made you a much better real estate investor today.
Yeah, I mean, everyone literally, like, everybody says, like, it doesn't matter. In the moment, you want your first deal to be a killer, but you look back and you're like, it literally doesn't matter what like, and I don't just buy anything. Don't purposely lose money, obviously, but like,
Yeah.
I definitely have this mindset of like, even on my like fourth, fifth deal, like, I'm almost still like, okay, I'm just learning. Like, I don't need to make a killing on every deal, and that's why I show a 6% cash on cash return. Because like again, it's about the experience, just getting into it. Like the barrier to put in an offer on a rental property at 20% down, that's like a whole new barrier than to put in 3.5% down for a primary. Like it's
Yeah.
tough, and
It
but
makes it a lot tougher to grow and scale that way as well. And that's why you look
yeah,
to strategies like the BRRRR strategy, where even if you're leaving $30,000 into a deal, it's a heck of a lot better than putting the $65,000 down to get that property in general. You're almost getting it with half as much, and the property's fixed up. So you have some, equity in there as well, and you're going to have less maintenance and expenses.
yeah, and like again, a few things that like I would have gotten all my money back if I would have or I thought I was going to get all my money back, and here's a few reasons that I didn't. One, closing cost in Maryland was like $15,000. I thought it was like five.
Yeah.
So there's 10 grand right there because you in Scranton closing costs are like five. So I could have done more research, but I was just like, hey Tommy, how much are closing costs? Okay, five. Cool. Mine was like 15. The other thing that we talked about, LTV, the 20% versus 25%, like that was another $12,000 hit. So right there was like almost $22,000 that I didn't
That
get
was
back.
unaccounted for. Yeah.
Yeah, that again, now when I do it again, like I know, okay, closing cost is going to be way more than I thought. I'm going to probably get a 75% loan to value. And so I'll be much better at running the numbers.
Yeah. I think that was really everything we had for today's episode as far as discussing Ty's first property. I mean, do you have any other action items or things of advice for any like first time BRRRR investors or anything else that you want to cover?
Let's find a good broker. I mean, again, everything worked out for me, but I feel like my broker almost blew up the deal. Um, and I mean, hard money can be scary, but as long as the numbers make sense, like it, and have more in reserves than I do. Literally, when I was done the rehab, I think I had like $2,000 left to my name. And if anything went wrong, it was like crap. So overestimate on the numbers. Yeah.
And it's okay. I mean, the one thing I want people to know is it's okay to know that this is going to take time. I mean, real estate investing is not overnight. It's not get rich quick. I mean, it's get rich slowly over time. And Ty took the time to send his wife to work much harder to raise money so that they could then buy their first rental property. And then they were searching for 2 to 3 months and still saving their money. And so it was a very slow process. And if anybody does want to read this BRRRR book, I mean, again, it's a very great book. It talks much more detail about the strategy. But one of my favorite concepts of the book is they talk about, I believe it's like a Tom and a Joe. I forget the other guy's name.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but Joe starts buying properties, as quick as he can, and he buys one, and he has to save up for a couple years, and he buys a second, and he saves up for another couple years, and like over time, he's got like 10 to 12 properties, and he does very well for himself. But then, and actually, I think that was Tom. Tom was the idiot. Joe is the smarter investor, and so what Joe does is he saves up to get like $150,000. So he doesn't buy a single property from like year one to I think years 5 or 7. But once he gets to year 7, he's got like $120,000 saved. What he starts doing is he's doing the BRRRR strategy, but he's like buying in cash. And so he buys the property cash, does the renovations cash, and then refinances, gets the money out, and just repeats that. And he's able to snowball so much quicker. So if you look at from years 1 to 5, Tom had 5 properties. He looked great. Joe still had 0 properties, but by year 10, when Joe started, now he's got 5 and Tom's got 7. So it still looks like Tom's ahead. When you fast forward to like year 20, Joe's got what, 20 properties? He's completely retired and like everything's great. Where Tom's got 12 and he's still living like a normal life, still in a good position, but it shows taking the time to really dive into a strategy, saving up money and going slow and steady can still be a great strategy in real estate.
Yeah, it's just exponential growth versus linear growth
Yeah.
and compound interest. It's all kind of the same concept. But
Awesome.
yeah,
Well, thank you,
and
Ty,
another,
or go ahead.
no, just one last thing is like to your point with just real estate makes money over time is I'm cash flowing $200 right now, but which again is not great. But I only left in $30,000 and I have an 8.5% rate. So my idea is like if rates go down to like if I could even get 6 or 5.5, my cash flow is going to go from like 200 to like 500, and then actually in that time also rents will go up. So I think
And
in
the
a couple
property is going to
years,
go up. So even though you say
right,
600 or $500, you might only get 400, but it's because the property is going to be worth 325, and so 75% of 325 is going to be, a little bit less. So now you're getting extra money out of that deal. So if you're negative $30,000, quote unquote, because that's what you left in the deal, say if you pull out, an extra 40 or 50, now you basically have none of your own money into that deal, regardless of the $300 to $400 a month you're getting in cash flow. And you can take that and then do another burst strategy, somewhere else and keep exponentially growing based off just that one purchase, all that hard work you put into that one property.
yeah, but yeah, it was a lot to learn. So I'm pretty excited about that one.
Awesome. Well, hopefully our listeners learned something throughout this episode. Thank you very much for tuning in to the Monopoly Mindset episode 7, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.